I'd like to welcome everybody to our special council meeting of Wednesday, January 24th, 2018. To my right, we have our city clerk, Frederic Bacal. We have Councillor David Torgeman, Councillor Oren Sabag, Councillor Ruth Kovac, myself, Mitchell Brownstein, Councillor Dina Burku, Councillor Stephen Erdely, who will be presenting our budget today as the Portfolio Council for Finance, Councillor Sidney Benizri, Councillor Mitch Kajavsky, our City Manager Tanya Abramovich, our Associate City Manager Nadia DeFuria, and our Associate City Manager Jonathan Schechter. So I'd like to welcome you all here today to this special meeting. As you all know, the budget was delayed as we were waiting for the results of the agglomeration budget, which, as we all know at this point, was a big, not happy surprise for all Montrealers. Montrealers of the City of Montreal Central and what we call the suburban cities, the demerged cities. When we worked, and we worked very hard, this new council and our staff worked very hard to prepare a budget with a tax freeze, 0% increase to our budget. We estimated, based on the representations of Mayor Plante, that she would be only having tax increases within the rate of inflation for a 2% increase to our Côte Part, the share that we would be sending to the agglomeration for central services, which amounts to $500,000. That $500,000 was budgeted for in the tax freeze that we had planned in our initial budget. However, based on the fact that we were hit with a further $1.3 million responsibility for payment of our Côte Part to the central city, we have had to redo our budget. And we're going to explain how we have managed to protect the residents of Côte Saint-Luc and ensure that here in the city of Côte Saint-Luc, their tax increase is below the rate of inflation, while at the same time maintaining the highest quality of services for the residents of Côte Saint-Luc. And in order for you to fully understand the budget, before question period, we will do our presentation and allow you to have your question period after we present, which will give you more of an opportunity to give more detailed questions, or perhaps we'll be answering some of your questions in advance through the presentation. So in order to present the budget, I will ask the councillor responsible for finance, Councillor Stephen Erdely.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a pleasure to be here. As the Mayor mentioned, I'll begin by a presentation. Oh, is the microphone on? Just to make sure. Is it on now?
Yeah.
So I'll begin by a presentation. I'll go through the presentation. As the Mayor mentioned, when we're done, I'll be happy to take any questions. Just to mention, the presentation will be posted online, as will an Excel spreadsheet summarizing the key information. Obviously, the actual budget itself is 40 pages long or so, so we won't be publishing the entire budget, but we'll be publishing a shortened version, and obviously the goal is to continue sharing more information with residents. So I'll start with a summary of the presentation. So we'll begin with the budget process and the guiding principle. We'll go over the budget in general. We'll talk about some of the details, including our local and agglomeration services, the revenue and expenditures or expenses. We'll talk about the property tax and the water reserve tax rates as well, and as mentioned, followed by a brief question period. So with regard to the budget building process, so we met as a council and actually in this case we met before the election and again met after the election to determine our principles and priorities. Obviously we had to look at the salaries and the costs for the employees of Côte Saint-Luc. We tried to go by category, look at the needs of the city. One of the big ones, as we'll talk about a bit further in the presentation, is the Côte Part. This is the amount that we pay for the agglomeration services, and I'll go through the detailed services in a moment. And of course, how much we're projecting for taxes, both municipal taxes or residential taxes and the water tax. And of course, we've had meetings with the council, met with the audit committee, and looked at the budget. Normally, we adopt the operating capital budgets at the same time. This year, a little different. We adopted the capital projects in December, and we're adopting our budget in January. And this is done because of Montreal or the agglomeration being late and only releasing their budget on January 10th, when normally it's released about a month earlier at the beginning of December. So I'll go through. So some of the principles: one, of course, we want to make sure we have a balanced budget. We want to look at ensuring the taxes cover the operating expenses, and of course, we want to minimize the tax burden on our residents. We want to ensure that whatever we're doing is financially sustainable. We want to make sure we have funds to upgrade all our city facilities. As you may have seen, of course, we've spent quite a bit of money in the last few years upgrading this building, and we'll be doing the final phase. Of course, upgrading some of the other facilities throughout the city, the roads and pipes and so on. We want to, of course, try to ensure that we're being efficient and transparent, and of course to share more information as much as possible, and to ensure that we're monitoring all the expenses and costs throughout the different departments of the city. So the next one, as I mentioned, is about, as I mentioned earlier, is our local versus agglomeration services. So this is a list of some of the key domains that are governed by the city, and some of the key ones that are through the agglomeration. So on the city side, you have our public works, administration, roads, snow, for example, is in there as well, public security, recreation, library, ACC, and debt service. On the agglomeration side, of course, the main ones being police and fire. There's the court system, public transit, and so on. So we'll go into a brief overview of this year. So first of all, this 2017 is the second year of a 3-year roll that came out actually towards the end of 2016, that began in 2017. The total increase in budgetary expenses is 5.23%, and that includes the increase from the agglomeration and local services. Now, we had expected, as has been previously mentioned, a reduction in our Côte PAR of roughly $1.6 million, which was not fully realized, and in the end, we got an increase of 6.7%, much greater than we had projected. We had projected it be in line with the rate of inflation, and if you look at the varying rates of inflation, they vary from roughly 1.7 to 2.1, depending on the source. In the end, after a lot of analysis over the last few weeks, what the city has done is a combination of cuts to certain domains, or let's say tightening of the belt, and we've ended up with a small tax increase. So the average, or I should say the actual tax increase, because this year there's no spreading, so the actual tax increase for single-family homes in Côte Saint-Luc is 1.5%. Obviously, our initial goal was 0%, and that is what we had planned. I could tell you I left on winter vacation at the end of December expecting a 0% tax increase based on an increase from the agglomeration of 2%. Obviously, that did not happen, and we had to come back and rejig the numbers. But in the end, we end up with a 1.5% tax increase for single-family homes, which is still lower than the rate of inflation forecast for the Greater Montreal by the Conference Board of Canada, which is at 2.1%. We've also done something new this year, and we'll be talking about a bit later in the evening, that we have a second tax rate for non-residential properties, so that is for commercial and industrial establishments, and that second property rate will be on evaluations over $45 million, and I'll be showing that a bit later in the presentation. So I'm going to go through the tax rates. So I'll use the pointer for a moment. So again, the average single-family home, because we didn't do spreading, so it's $584,600. It was the same in 2017. Our tax rate for 2018, this is the general tax rate, or residual rate, is 1.0601. The rate for water is 0.0508 for a total of 1.1109. So it works out to an average increase, as mentioned, of 1.5%, or $96. Again, the goal or the hope initially was to have zero increase, but as mentioned, because of the last-minute increase from the agglomeration. And just to reiterate, as I mentioned previously, even up until the end of December, in all our conversations, and the mayor I'm sure will agree, in all of the conversations had on the political side and on the staff side, including with our treasurer, they had told us not to be, that there would not be a surprise. Of course, we were surprised at the end.
You're using the other version, which is fine, but oh, you have it here, you see it's
Oh.
2.3, but it's coming out the old version, I don't know why.
Oh,
Without my changes.
okay. Oh, okay.
But you'll note that.
Yeah, sorry, I just noticed, I guess, I don't know if Darrell, that's the final version, but anyway. So just to mention, if you compare, so it's a 1.5 this year, it was 1.9, the previous year was a 2.3%, and again, if we average the previous 4 years, as I mentioned previously, the average tax increase over the last 4 years was 1.76%, which is in line with the rate of inflation over the last 4 years. Again, we use the Conference Board of Canada's predictions, which is the same as Montreal, and their average of the last 4 years has been approximately 1.9, 1.95%. So I'm going to go to revenue now. So on the revenue side, so these are total revenues here. So the total for Côte Saint-Luc for this year is $70.5 million, or $70,542,130. If we look at the breakdown, we have revenue from taxes, local improvement tax, which there are not very many left, compensation LIA taxes, which is for properties such as the federal government and provincial government buildings, post offices, post office, I should say, schools and hospital. You can see there's a slight increase, and from what I remember, the increase is due to some of the expansions to some of the French schools, the French public schools, École de la Mosaïque and École des Amis du Monde, which have done some expansions over the last year or two, which led to a slightly higher evaluation and therefore more money in compensation LIA taxes for the city. So this is the total, and again, the total increase, if we compare, is 3.24%. Last year, the increase was 1.94, so slightly higher. And again, most of that is attributed to the significant increase in the expenses from the Agglo, which we had not predicted. On the revenue from taxes side, so you have the breakdown by residential, apartment 6+. So one of the things we also did this year was we slightly lowered the ratio. The apartments over the last few years had been received, let's say last year, the average apartment had received a significant higher increase, so we lowered their increase slightly. So the average apartment or multifamily dwelling is an increase of roughly 1.1%. And then you have the increase for vacant land, it was the same at 1.5. For non-residential properties, there are two rates as mentioned, and I'll talk about that a bit further in the presentation, and it'll be mentioned later in the evening when we adopt a motion to that. We also have the water reserve and a small provision for municipal taxes, for municipal tax provision. This is for contestations. Every year there's a certain number of contestations, and from what we see, there's still quite a few contestations that are still, let's say, before the board or the contestation board, so we don't have the final results, so we put in a provision of $50,000, which should cover that. Oh, oopsie. Sorry.
You have to go ahead.
I flipped slides by mistake. Okay, and I'll go to other revenues. So if we look at other revenues, so we have some of the key categories. So for example, interest, recreation, the aquatic center, transfer duties, which is for property taxes or welcome taxes, fines, services by public works, fire department, EMS, water, proceeds from land sales, government grants, and miscellaneous revenues. So just to explain a few points or a few anomalies that you may notice. One, just to notice, there's an increase for the ACC, for the Aquatic Center. There's, I should mention, also an increase on the expenses side, but that is attributable to some new programs. So we have some new programs, such as expansions of the camp. We have new programs or more activities for the swim team, for example, and more activities related to the mini rec room as well. One to mention as well, and I'll talk about this a bit later, for government grants, you see a reduction. This has to do with the way, I guess a few instances. One has to do with the way that the city attributed or I guess the way the city did accounting treatments for grants from the provincial government, partly related to the tech. As I mentioned previously, the tech funding is from the gas tax, which funds major projects such as water pipe sleeving and road repairs. So the way it was treated changed. So you'll see when I get later on, you'll see it appear on a different slide. So just so you can see the anomaly here has to do with accounting treatments that were changed. The government changed it and then changed it back. The reasoning I have my opinion on, but I won't mention that right now. But basically, it has to do with that. And one of the other things to mention, you can see, is the transfer duties. The welcome tax keeps going up each year. So every year, we seem to be doing well as far as more homes being bought and the city gaining revenue from welcome tax. I'm going to continue. So the next one I want to talk about is some of the specific grants. So the city has also gained more grants, and these are not related to the tech. So the first one is from the Ministry of Environment, the Ministère du Développement Durable, de l'Environnement, and what is it, Climat, it's for climate change. So this is the redevance. So this is based on a tax that is put on every ton of garbage that goes to the landfill. And the city, the more we recycle, the more we compost, has received extra funding in this $325,000, plus from Recyc Québec for more recycling. We also received approximately $60,000 for the library. We have a small PAD program, and this is for funding for homes that want to upgrade for senior citizens to make it easier for them to live in their house. And this is, the last one is linked to, this one is actually linked to the tech. This is the interest. As I mentioned previously, not only do we get the capital portion, we also get an interest portion back from the ministry, the Quebec Ministry of Finance, to pay for the tech project. So with the assumption that we borrowed over 10 to 20 years. So the breakdown of revenue, you could see the majority, as has been the case since I started and long before, the majority of the revenue for Côte Saint-Luc, and again for most cities it is very similar, is from municipal taxes at 87%. There's a small amount from local improvement tax. The compensation lieu tax is about 2%. And the other revenue, so this is from all the user fees, fines, and so on, is approximately 10% for the city of Côte Saint-Luc. So we're going to go to expenses. So with regard to expenses, so some of the key things to point out. So we have here, here we have a general breakdown. We'll go through it in more specific. So this is the total of our local expenses. So we have the general administration, public safety, public works, environment, recreation, and so on. Plus, you'll see an increase in the debt service. So this is partly related to, again, partly related to accounting procedures, partly the goal of the city is to continue to pay down our long-term debt. So you'll see an increase there as well. So this one is related, the next one is related to the Côte Par, and this is a bit tricky to explain, so I'll take a minute or two on this one. So if we look at the top line, the $28.8 million, that was what we paid last year for the Côte Par. It was adjusted towards the end of the year when we received approximately $800,000 to just over $28 million. Now, we had, based on the documents we had received from Montreal, we had assumed we'd get an extra $872,000, so for a total just over $1.6 million. So let's assume that the agglomeration had a zero increase. So let's say the agglomeration total budget was the same this year as it was last year, then Côte Saint-Luc would have ended up paying approximately $27.2 million. That is what we should have paid on a zero increase at the agglomeration level. Now, we estimated a 2% increase, which comes up to just over $500,000. So the estimated amount that we had budgeted, as per the decree, as per what we should have paid, was roughly $27.7 million. What ended up happening was we ended up paying approximately $29 million, just under $29 million. So if we compare the difference between what we had forecast or what we had budgeted as 1.3, and if we compare to the increase compared to the, I should say, I guess the zero increase budget is approximately 1.8 million, which puts us at a 6.7% increase. And again, this is not acceptable. And obviously, we're not happy, and I know the mayors will be voting tomorrow, and obviously, the mayors of the demerged cities will not be voting in favor of the budget as is. So this is to explain, again, where the actual numbers come from. Now, with regard to so these are numbers compared to actuals from last year. So these are numbers compared to the actuals from last year. So we have the budget 2018 compared to 2017. So what we do see is the city did benefit, so just to be clear, the city did partially benefit from the decree. However, we did not fully benefit, or the gains were not fully realized. So in the end, if we compare the actuals, it is a small increase, but the fact is the city should have been paying much less this year. Instead, we actually end up paying more. So the expectation was that we would be paying approximately 1.1 million less, and we end up paying 200,000 more for a difference for a total of 1.3 million, if everyone's following. So obviously, we're not happy with that, and again, it's the reason why we cannot support the budget as is. So I'm going to talk about some of the local expenses in a bit more detail. So I'm not going to go through obviously line by line, but I'll go through some of the key ones. So first I want to mention with regard to public relations and communication, you'll see an increase there, and part of that is for a new hire, for a new person who will be working with the communications department, working with Daryl and Regine, and that person will be working on the website, and part of the goal is to be able to share more information in a more timely manner with the public. As we've seen, our communication department has been working overtime for the last several months, and the purpose is to have someone assist them to be able to share more as far as open government is concerned. You'll see a decrease here under undistributed administration expenses. The biggest factor there is the election. So in the 2017 budget, obviously we have the election expense there, and we'll see a small increase. In the city planning and city inspection, the city has allocated more funds for an extra inspector in the urban planning department, and that person will be able to do more inspections of multifamily dwellings and as well be doing inspections for the construction sites that are going up through Côte Saint-Luc. So the next is with regard to EMS. EMS, we have a roughly 4% increase in line with potential extra staffing and in line with the increase based on the new collective agreements that were signed. The next one is on Public Works. So Public Works, here's where you'll see the largest increase. So this is based on several factors. The first one I'll talk about, just to mention, is snow. So you'll see a significant increase in the snow budget. What the city has realized is over the last few years, we've been somewhat underestimating snow and ice. For example, salt, we have gone over budget the last few years, partly because of climate change. There's been more days with freezing rain, and we've had to spend more money on salt and snow removal. And the price of salt went up as well. The price per ton of salt went up, which is beyond our control. We are part of a group tender with the City of Montreal and most of the demerged cities. The other big one is the biggest one there as well is under parks and green areas. So we, as a city, have committed to extra funding for local parks. We've committed extra funding for the arboriculture or horticulture department. We have had to cut down many trees, as you know. The goal is to be able to plant more trees. The goal is to be able to plant more shrubs to replace the trees that have had to be cut because of the emerald ash borer. Part of this, I should say, will come from the capital project, but part of this has to come from the local budget. Every time we cut down a tree, the stump has to be removed. There's a lot of work that has to be done to do that as well. There's also extra funding for a project manager. We are trying to do more, and obviously the goal is to make sure we're able to complete all our projects on time and on budget. And so it's a small extra expense there. And the last increase, just to mention, is for road services. There's a small increase. The city will be spending more money on potholes, pothole repairs and road repair. Right now, for this year, for 2018, on the capital side, the focus continues to be on the pipes. There'll be work starting very soon on sewer sleeving and throughout the summer on water main sleeving. But with regard to roads, the focus for the capital projects for roads will really begin in 2019-20. So until then, we need to make sure we're able to maintain our roads as is. So the next one is with regards to the water distribution. Here we see a significant increase. The formula change, you could see more significantly if you go from 2016 to 2017. The agglomeration change increased the price per cubic meter of water significantly. Now, the only issue here is we are always behind. So the budget for 2017 and budget for 2018 as well are not yet actual. So one of the things we've requested and we're waiting to receive the final numbers from Montreal, is what our actual consumption was for 2017 to be able to better vet or better analyze the 2018 numbers. So we should be able to getting those numbers shortly, but our feeling is those numbers are higher than they should be, but we won't be able to know that until we get the final numbers, and that should be in the next few weeks from Montreal. And the next one is with regard to recreation. So just to reiterate some of the points I mentioned here, so you'll see some extra expenses, and like I said, these are based on the extra expenses are compared to the extra revenue that I talked about earlier. And again, this is related to extra programming for the summer camp, more programming for the swim team, the mini rec room as well, and and some new socio-community programs as well to be starting in 2018. Oh, and one, actually I should mention, that is dear to my heart, is for the skating rink activities. So Côte Saint-Luc reinitiated. These were cut 2 years ago, partly due to weather factors and partly due to budget. Côte Saint-Luc cut back in at the end of 2015, cut the budget for the outdoor skating rinks. So this year we have returned the outdoor skating rinks to the Confederation Annex and to Richard Schwartz Park. And the goal is to assess this year the use, and obviously with regard to the weather, and so far it's been a cold winter, which has been good for the skating rinks, not necessarily good for people's heating bills and snow removal, but we're going to continue to assess and hopefully or possibly open more skating rinks in the next year. Next is for the library. And for the library, we see a small increase there. And again, part of this is due to collective agreement. Part of it is due to new projects or new initiatives, more money for ebooks, for electronic magazines, more money for a makerspace as well that the library is looking into. So we'll see if how that comes up. I'll keep going. So next is regard to the local expenses and some of the CMN debt service and financing costs. So just to mention, as I mentioned in one of the earlier slides, the way that we do the accounting treatment for government grants has changed. So you'll see here, for example, in 2018, you see on note 2, there's a negative $617,000. So that is actually coming off the repayment. So if we look at our capital repayment is $4,739,800. We actually have to subtract the $617,000 here, and that is what we get this year from the tech grant. So the treatment changed in the last year. It actually, again, changed back and forth, so that's why that line doesn't appear in the previous years. The rest of the numbers are pretty similar. Just to highlight 1 or 2 points, though, the one I want to mention here is what's called the working fund. So rather than the city borrowing money from a bank, the city will set aside part of the surplus, and we borrow money from ourselves. So it's money going in and out, and this is used usually for smaller capital projects. Could be for technology, usually projects that have a lifespan of 5 to 10 years. So again, we borrow from ourselves, so we don't have to pay interest. And I'll keep going. So we have next a breakdown of some of the expenses. The largest one, as has been the case every year, is for the agglomeration at 41%, followed by the various different departments within the city. So we'll go to total revenue of $70 million. Again, 41.5 of that is for local services. Roughly 29 million is for the agglomeration, for a total of $70.5 million this year. Now, so for the tax rates. So for the tax rates, I mentioned previously the rate. So here we have the rate for the residential, we have the rate for apartments 6+, for vacant land. For vacant land, there's no water tax, so the assumption is there's no water use. And for the non-residential, and again, I'll talk about this a bit later, but what this is doing in a nutshell is creating a new category for non-residential or industrial properties over $45 million. What the goal is over the next few years is to try to lower the non-residential or commercial rate while increasing the rate over 45 million. Côte Saint-Luc's commercial rate is one of the highest on the island of Montreal. Our goal is to make sure that we're supporting our businesses. Now, Côte Saint-Luc, unlike many cities does not have many small and mom-and-pop establishments, at least on their own. Most of the businesses are in shopping malls or shopping centers, but our goal is to try to help support them by lowering the tax for the owner of the malls or shopping centers, and that is the plan we're trying to do over the next 3 years. And to offset that, we are increasing the tax rate for properties for industrial properties in Côte Saint-Luc over $45 million. The tax rate, again, this is a repeat of one of the slides I showed earlier, but just to reiterate and put it all into context. So again, it works out to a 1.5% increase, and again, this year, because there's only because everyone's increase was the same, or increase in their valuation was the same in 2017 as 18, because of no spreading, it'll be an actual 1.5% increase for all single-family homes in Côte Saint-Luc. And with that, I'll take questions.
Okay. All right, so thank you very much, Councillor Erdely. I'd like to thank Councillor Erdely, Treasurer Marino, the entire staff, the entire council for all their hard work in putting together this budget. It was definitely not an easy task, but as the City of Côte Saint-Luc wants to continue to be known as the greatest community in which to live, which means that we provide the highest quality of service. We have the best facilities, whether it's our library, which has been around for 51 years, or our aquatic and community center, which has now been around for about 6.5 years, or our skating rinks and the outdoor ones that we opened this year, or the beautiful parks, and the best snow removal. This is what Côte Saint-Luc is known for, and that's why people come and live in our community, and we want to thank all of our staff, from the blue collars, the white collars, the professionals, and the managers, for making this the best community in which to live. And we work with you to manage our money responsibly, so that I think it was highlighted that the average family home increase should be $96 this year. And you'll note that irrespective of the $1.3 million surprise, our tax increase over the last 3 years has gone down. It was 2.3% 2 years ago, 1.9% last year, and 1.5% this year. So we're trying to manage funds properly, deal with unforeseen situations such as this one, and still provide the highest level of services. So we have not cut services, and we are proud of our gems, which are our parks and the aquatic center and the library. So thank you all for working so hard on this budget, and I'm sure that we'll be able to maintain the highest level of service to satisfy the needs of the residents of Côte Saint-Luc. And now I open the floor for question period. I have one person that's registered so far, so I'm going to call Lily Yeskovich first. But anybody else who wants to ask questions is more than welcome. Welcome, Mrs. Yeskovich. Yesovich, excuse me, Mrs. Yesovich. Welcome.
Hi, thank you very much for all your hard work. I appreciate it. At our last meeting, Mayor, you told me you would give me numbers for the mini-rec. Not what they were making, but what we made. The budget is very, very general, and I don't have numbers to tell me what they gave us last year, and that's what I would like to know specifically. What Côte Saint-Luc made because the mini-rec is in the ACC.
Right. Well, I do believe we have those numbers, and we should be able to provide them. I don't have them right in front of me, but we can provide them for you this week, I guess, because we do have those numbers.
And the other thing which really concerned me was, Mr. Erdely, thank you for all your hard work. What you said specifically, and I'm sort of quoting you, is the reason the expenses in the ACC have gone up is because we're expanding services. And one of the services we're expanding is the mini-rec. The mini-rec is a private business. Why would our expenses go up if the mini-rec is expanding business
I don't know if he was
services?
referring to mini-rec in that.
Yeah, that's exactly what he said.
But that would not have an effect. Councillor Erdely. Councillor Erdely can respond to that since you asked the question.
As I mentioned, there are additional expenses and there's additional revenues. If we compare 2017 versus 2018, if we balance out let's say the balance of expenses minus revenue is roughly the same, I think within a $5,000 or so difference. Now, to clarify, for the rec room, the way it works, the residents will pay through the city. There's costs for the employees are paid, and then there's a revenue sharing, a profit sharing. So if there are more activities, there's more revenue for the city, but they're also more expensive because the city is paying for the employees. So to clarify, there's more revenue and there are more expenses.
Let's think how that would work.
I just want to go on record as saying I mean, in front of everybody, in front of God and everybody, that's not a smart business plan. If this is a private business, they should be paying expenses and we should be sharing revenue.
Okay, well, if I can...
That's just my humble opinion as a business person.
All the money
If I
goes to
may,
us.
We don't pay.
Mr. Mayor, I know we've had these...
Yeah, we
discussions
have.
one, and I
We
know
have.
we
We do.
agreed to disagree. The city,
We
and
do
I
it
think
that
I
way.
mentioned this to you earlier,
We
the city
save all
enters
the
into
money.
partnerships with
We
many
pay
different organizations. The city has partnership agreements with minor league hockey. The city has partnerships with Synchronized Swimming Association. The city has partnerships with several different organizations. What bothers me, if I may, is that it seems that people are picking on one. If you'd asked me for information about every other organization in the city, then I'd at least say it's a fair question. When someone is asking specific questions about one organization and not others, it just makes me wonder what the reason is.
I have nothing to do with Mini Rec. I don't know the people who own Mini Rec. I have a granddaughter who would be certainly eligible to use Mini Rec, but this is just something that I happened upon by accident. And as a business person and as a taxpayer, it just shocked me that I understand about the laws in Quebec and all that. I just, at this point, there's nothing really you can say to calm me down. What I would like to know is specifically the amount of money the city of Côte Saint-Luc made from Mini Rec last year.
Mrs. Yezovich will get you that
Yeah.
number, but based on the type of agreement that we have with this private organization, we cannot lose money. We can only make. We can make more or less, but at least we can't lose. When we run things by ourselves, sometimes we make a profit and sometimes we have a loss. When we do it with a private organization like this, we can't have a loss because it's we just share their profit. If they don't make any money, yes, we wouldn't make any money, but then obviously they would
But
stop
we're-
their business.
Yes, but if they're not making any money, we still have our expenses. You just said we're paying the
No,
expenses of the
if
employees
we-
registering
If they don't
people.
make any money, then they would close up. The only way they're going to continue is if they make a profit and then we share it. If They're not going to, unlike a city where we can go to the taxpayers for taxes.
Well, that's
they need to
exactly
ma-
what you're doing.
No,
You're going to
no,
the
not for the
taxpayers
mini
for
rec.
tax.
For the
Not
mini,
for mini rec,
For
but
mini rec,
yeah.
they need to make a profit or they'll close up. And if they make a profit, we make a profit too.
Yeah.
And if I can add one more point, Mr. Mayor, just to mention that the program that existed, and I've stated on the record, I've stated to you as well, the program that existed before was a program that benefited a small number of children and cost the city a significant amount of money. And the city was losing a significant amount of money. And I can tell you, I analyzed the budget, as did the members of the audit committee, the council, the staff. And to me, it is our job to, when we see a situation where the city is losing a huge amount of money for a small number of children, to make a change, and that's why the change was made.
Absolutely.
So-
What I would just like to say publicly is I don't think this is a good business plan.
All right.
And that's why I want to see the numbers. It's not because I have anything particularly against this particular business. I know from talking to people they do a great job. But I don't care what kind of a job they do. I only care about the bottom line because my taxes on my personal house, you know.
But as I mentioned, if you cared about the bottom line, you'd be happy. You'd be thanking us because we took a situation where the city was losing money and replaced it.
No, you've raised my taxes every single year since I've had my house. Well,
Not
no,
from
there-
bringing,
no,
not
there
from
were a
bringing in
couple.
private organizations. When we bring in the private
No, no, I'm
organizations,
talking-
it doesn't
I know, but
hurt
we
the
have,
taxpayer.
you know, we have to look at the big picture here. So I'm looking at the big picture. I'm just particularly, you know, you said something to me, Mayor, which really disturbed me. And it sticks in my mind. And you said to me, Lily, the city of Côte Saint-Luc is not a business. We cannot run the city as a business. Well, I'm sorry, I don't agree. The city of Côte Saint-Luc has to be a business, or else we're going to end up bankrupt like Detroit. You have to run the city like a business. You don't have to make money, but you certainly have to run the city like a business. If there are businesses where you have partnerships, then you have to take advantage of those businesses where you have partnerships with the hockey and the basketball and the baseball and whatever else you have, and you have to make money. It's 2018. We have to make money.
Listen,
So I understand what you're saying, and I understand it's a wonderful, wonderful idea. It's a wonderful, wonderful, it's a great line. It's a great blurb in the newspaper, but it isn't the reality. The reality is we have to make money.
The reality is, the library has cost the residents of Côte Saint-Luc, in today's dollars, over $100 million since the last 51 years. No businessman's going to do that. It's over
No,
$100 million.
I understand that, but again, we have to
An
look
average
at
of
the big picture.
$2.3 million a year it costs to run the library.
Again,
We
we
do
have
it
to-
because we serve, and people wanted that library, and Mayor Lang and others fought very hard to build that
Absolutely,
library.
and it's a
because it was a
wonderful
vital
facility.
service for the
It's a
community.
wonderful
And that's what I
facility.
mean when I say that we don't run it just like a business. I have a
I
Bachelor of Commerce. I know that I need everything to balance in the end. But my objective is to ensure that we have facilities and services that provide for the needs of the residents of the
Yes.
community, and that we use their tax dollars
Just remember-
wisely.
But just remember that you are balancing your budget on the backs of the taxpayers. So if you're going to balance your budget on the backs of the taxpayers, then you have to look to make a few more dollars so that we won't have to pay so much more.
Well, our revenues
Anyway,
have gone up. Our revenues obviously are always going up, or we wouldn't be able to maintain the
And our expenses
1.5%.
have gone up. I mean, the ACC is costing a fortune.
Less than the
Far few-
library.
But far fewer people use the
No.
ACC than the library.
No. They're both, I consider them both two gems used by so many
Yeah.
and appreciated
Anyway,
by so many.
I will anxiously await those figures from whoever gives them. I
On the
think
record,
everyone has
sure.
my email address and my phone number.
Jonathan Schechter, I'm going to task you with that job of making sure that Mrs. Yesovich gets the money that we made from the rec room in the profit that we
17.
made, our share of the profits for 2017 from the rec room, Côte Saint-Luc's profits. I've seen that document, it exists. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions? Jeff, Joseph, and your address, please?
8261 Mackle.
Thank you.
First of all, got to congratulate everybody. I know, look, we all know this was a tough job, especially when you get thrown this kind of curveball. Let's not kid the players here. That was a very unfortunate event. And I know in the budgeting process, when you're anticipating a little bit of an increase and all of a sudden you get totally whacked, especially late in the going, it's an unfortunate situation for everybody. So I'm not going to, anyway, with that in mind, I just need a clarification, and perhaps, Stephen, you can answer it. We've been talking about, I've been using about this figure about the savings anticipated from the agglomeration bill. Now, as I understand it, and you can correct me on this one, okay? In 2017, you got a quote part reimbursement of approximately $799,000. Now, just correct me, in the last council meeting, as I understood, and correct me again if I'm wrong, that reimbursement was received in September of 2017?
We received a check for the
We
other one.
received, so to clarify, so we originally paid $28,843,000. We received a check of $799,000. The exact date, we received it in the fall.
Yeah, it was in the fall. That's fine.
September, October, we received.
Yeah, I think in the last council meeting you said, I just wanted to clarify. So the first question would be, okay, and then we were anticipating some kind of
1.6
quote card.
million. We were
Yeah, but the 1.6 million, that's what I'm trying to clarify. The 1.6 million we're saying was 2017 and 18 combined?
So if I can explain, I'll try to pull up the numbers as I'm talking.
Yeah.
The numbers represent a formula.
Yeah.
So the way it works is costs. And I'm pulling it up. I think I explained this briefly last meeting, but I'll explain it again.
You did.
So Côte Saint-Luc's original share of the, so Côte Saint-Luc was originally paying 1.256%.
Correct.
So that percentage is going to slowly decrease. So there were two options. One option was to increase it right away from the highest to the lowest. The other option was to do it in steps, sort of like a step function. So what happened is the agglomeration, as per the decree, decided to split it and do it over in 3 steps, let's say.
Correct.
So the first step was last year, where they adjusted it from 1.256 to 1.218. And then this year, In the second step, it's being adjusted to 1.177.
Right, and that 1.77 basically builds into that
Right.
reduction due to the new formula.
Exactly.
Okay.
So to backtrack again, so the original number, the 28 million, was based on the 1256.
Right.
This number, a reduction of roughly 800,000, was based on the estimate of 1.218.
Right.
And then the additional, in the end, it actually works out to approximately 1.67 million, so 1,672,000. And that number, this 27 million, would have been what we had estimated based on a 1.177 rate. Now, the estimates, so we'd done this initial estimate as if there was a 0% increase. So let's say the agglomeration total expenses
Right.
for 2017 and 2018 were the same, and I'm pulling up the actual numbers, so I have a bunch of documents in front of me. So if, I have a lot of spreadsheets here. So the total for last year was $2,249,000,000. So basically, we assumed, okay, let's assume they kept it at $2,249,000,000. Then we should have paid $27.2 million. That's what we should have paid had the Agglo been a zero increase.
Totally.
Now, we estimated roughly a 2% increase on that, which again would have put us at roughly $27.7 million.
Yeah.
In the end, we ended up $1.3 million higher.
And 2% might even be a kind of a generous,
Right.
level, especially given the last couple of agglomeration.
Well, again,
It's a cushion, it's a good cushion.
2% we figured was a fair.
Yeah.
At that point, we didn't know, we'd seen different rates ranging from 1.7 to 2.1, but obviously it ended up again at a 6.7% increase.
Okay, and so we can, and I'm asking this more so people can really get a clear idea, because, numbers all over the place. The 799,000, we call it a round up, when we got that check, what has it become of it?
That's a good question.
That's,
So right now, the 799,000 is gone to the surplus.
right, and we don't have the surplus figure yet.
We don't have a final, we will have the
Right.
final surplus figures. I mean, based on that 799,000 plus some other savings, we estimate the surplus for 2017 to be approximately 1.2 million. However,
Yeah.
towards the end of 2017, we got hit by a few snowstorms, which cost the city extra. So we won't, we'll have the final audited statements within the next few months, and then we'll be able to give the actual surplus. Now, long-term, that is the discussion the council has to have. My personal opinion would be, obviously, it's always nice to keep some money in the surplus that we want to keep for a rainy day, but I think it's a good use would be to cut down on borrowing for some of the capital projects coming up in the future, whether it's the arena, whether it's the outdoor pool, whether it's the additional ice surface, but that is a political discussion that we'd have to have.
For sure.
And obviously, we each have our opinion. I think we all would agree that it's nice to have some money. How much we keep in the end is something that we'll have to discuss.
And to clarify for everybody, the quote park reductions, we know there was a 3-year agreement agreed to back in June for the benefit of benefit of taxpayers, ratepayers. Since we have a formula there, do we know, we have a rough estimate of what reduction we're getting for 2019 now, correct? No, assuming no, what they do with it is another visit.
So, I don't know if I could answer. I mean, it's supposed to be an extra 800,000, so it should be a total of 2.4 million.
Right.
Reduction off the original number here. Now, if I could predict the future, I would. I'd be in a different job. Probably. I don't know.
And then, you know what? I'll get one final question, and maybe I'll just do it for the hockey parents around here. I know it was advertised with our M&A about this $1 million Moskovich. I didn't really see clear numbers here. What are we planning to spend for this refrigeration system? Any
First of all,
upgrades? We have an idea.
That's not in the operating budget, that's in the capital works budget.
Yeah, I understand that. I don't
And
remember.
right now, we've gone to professional services to find out what the cost would be
Right.
for what we have to do, which is
Right.
the refrigeration redo of the Samuel Moskovich Arena.
Yeah.
And with the option of refrigerating the annex.
Yeah.
And they're estimating it right now, we don't have professionals.
No, I'm not.
In-house, they say it could be between $1 and $2 million. I mean, we're waiting for professionals.
No, no, it was more from the aspect, I was just wondering if there were numbers built into this year's budget yet for.
It's not,
at least
it's not in this operational budget.
Yeah, so just to clarify, there is a sum in the capital projects for the arena, but as the mayor mentioned, obviously, we don't know exactly, and I prefer not to give the exact estimate, because we don't want to tip off potential bidders to what we've allocated.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right.
Because we want a true bidding process.
I just wanted to see if it was there, because we know the whole idea with this up to $1 million is whatever you guys are spending, Quebec is going to match, but up to the limits for.
We'll be
each of the
spending
refrigerations.
more than that.
We'll be spending.
Wow, we'll go by what's
No,
happening.
because that grant is for the Samuel Moscovich Arena as well.
Yeah. Okay, that's all, guys. Congratulations.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Any further questions? Okay, Marissa Seidel. Welcome.
So I looked over everything. I actually don't have a problem with this budget at all. I think it's very fair for the most part. I don't think anyone can really complain living in the city that we do that $100 for a single family home is unreasonable. That's my opinion. There's only a couple of issues that I want to bring up. First off, I understand the frustration with the Agglomeration. I don't share the opinion simply because the reality is I don't believe Montreal, we didn't vote for them, so we can't really expect them to look out for our best interest. That's what you guys are for. I'm not saying you didn't look out for our best interest, but I'm saying that my issue is by blaming the Agglo Council on a regular basis when we were supposed to partner with them at some point, not sure is the best tactic, but I'll leave that to you. You're going tomorrow to vote against the budget, which I think is the best that we can hope for, but we have to sort of understand that as citizens of a municipality that doesn't vote for these people, we can't expect them to look out for us, number one. They have to look out for them for number one. She doesn't owe us anything, more or less. That's my opinion on the matter. When we're looking at a way to reduce our expenses, I know you and I had a conversation with it over Let's Chat briefly. I get that the ACC is a service that we need and that we use and that the families in the city use. My concern is simply, how are we looking to cut expenses in that building? I don't have a problem with the mini rec. I'm going to assume you guys know what you're doing with regards to negotiating that contract. If you're telling us that it's a profitable program, fantastic. But when you're looking, this is the chart that I put online. I looked for it here, but it doesn't quite match. This was the chart that was provided to Charles as access for information. I don't know who gave it to him, but he posted it online in October, and then I posted it again about a month ago, or a couple of weeks ago. So what concerns me is if the profitability of the mini rec is included in the revenues. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
In the 218 budget, there's a line for revenues and a line for expenses for the mini rec.
Right.
It's clear.
I'm only looking at 2017's
Okay.
actual versus budget.
I don't know.
So in the revenue for the budget, it shows clearly that revenue went up, which is a good thing, and logically you can deduce from that that if the mini rec is contributing to that, that would account for the increase in revenue. A little bit, right. My concern is all the other major expenses that seem to be going up. For example, it costs us just as much to run the pool as it does to fix the place. And of course, this is not a detailed budget because I don't know what the request was when he asked for these items, but there was no breakdown with regards to what's being repaired under general building repairs, maintenance, and utilities. So to have an increase of almost $1 million when the pool costs $1 million, can I ask, what are we fixing in the building that's costing $1 million? Or how much of that $1 million is utilities? And is there anything that we're doing with regards to looking at like LED projects, et cetera, that would reduce the cost of the utilities long term? Believe me, Mitchell, I'm not suggesting that we turn off the lights in the ACC at night and that's going to save us $1 million. But I'm curious as to what programs we're looking at. That's a huge number. So when it costs us just as much to fix the place and run the place as the pool does.
Stephen, Councillor Erdely, go ahead.
So to clarify, I don't necessarily, I have my sheets in front of me. And as I mentioned when we
Yeah.
exchanged online, is I don't know, you're asking me questions about a document that was obtained by someone else
Right.
through an Access to Information Act. It's hard for me to comment on it because I don't know what the request. I know that our Associate City Manager, Jonathan Schechter, gets probably close to 100, has probably gotten close to 100 requests in the last year. So I don't know the details of each of those requests, so I can't comment. What I can say is, I believe the line you're looking at, just to clarify, is the general building line, which includes repairs, maintenance, and utilities. So it's not just repairs. It's an $18 million building. For an $18 million building, it's going to take roughly $1 million a year in repairs, maintenance, and utilities per year. If you look at that, if we compare that number over the last few years, I mean, it's ranged, I mean, it's increased, I have to admit, from around 739,000 to,
1.11465. What's the ratio of that, do you know, utilities versus repairs and maintenance? Do you have-
well, do I know it? I mean, I have it,
Just, I mean, more,
she's looking at a summary.
yeah.
I have the summary version, I have the long version. I mean, what I can
Is
tell
the
you.
long
You want
version
the long, you want the long draft?
And, well, I have it in front of me. I mean, the long version, as I mentioned, is about 40 pages long.
just for this particular section?
No, 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 I'm saying for the entire city.
36.
So what I think you're looking is here. I mean,
My general concern while you're looking is only that if we're looking at a $1.3 million absence of funds that we weren't expecting, I'm certainly not suggesting we shut the building down, but it looks like it's costing us a lot of money. Notwithstanding all these programs that we're putting in, which sound fantastic, what are we doing to try and cut expenses in this building? I mean, the library may have cost $100 million, but you're talking 51 years. This building is 6 years old. It's a $10 million loss.
Right, no, I'm not going to, let you study that. In the meantime, I just want to give you a perspective when I say that, though, because I'm getting it out of perspective on the library. So the library costs $2.4 million in expenses, and we get revenue of $100,000, so it's about $2.3 million cost to run.
Okay.
And the ACC, the net to run is 1.8, and he's looking at the breakdown on your question. So, yes, I mean, the library costs $2.3 million, and we could look at buying less books, you could go, or whatever, or have less staff, and the same things with the ACC, and he'll go through it line by line, but obviously our staff, first of all, each director looks at their entire budget and their entire department and looks at how can we cut, what can we do to do better. That's what a budget process is about. How can we bring in more revenue, and how can we cut our expenses? And they come to us with a lot of recommendations, which we try to do. On your one question on that line, I'll let Stephen, if he has the information.
so I have it, it's on page 34 of the long version. But basically, just to give some rough numbers, about $500,000 is for blue-collar workers.
Okay.
So that is for the blue-collar workers who are there to maintain and clean the building. That includes about $100,000 in service contracts. So those are for contracts, again, to maintain the pool and so on.
So those are labor costs.
Labor.
Well, again, one is
Blue
the
collars.
blue collars, and then that's, I should say, the regular blue collars. There's a small amount for overtime, and then there's let's say, regular unit. These are, I guess, white-collar workers, I believe. We have approximately, like I said, $100,000 for service contracts. That is for the maintenance done through external organizations. We have approximately $170,000 for electricity for the building. That is for the lighting and for the heating and cooling and for the water, although there is partly from geothermal, but there's additional electricity costs. We have also for natural gas, which again is for partly for the heating. Repairs, so general repairs, just to mention, is actually very little. The actual cost of the repairs is roughly $15,000 for the year.
It's new, it's a new building.
If I could humbly suggest to you, could that part of that information be readily accessible? Because when a citizen looks, even on your sheet that you've just given out now today, when somebody looks at this and sees $1.14 million in this kind of expense, and doesn't have the breakdown to be advised that part of it's labor, part of it's utilities, but it's quite a daunting figure. Now that you're explaining it, it makes more or less sense. But
Good idea.
Yeah,
I have no
no,
problem with that. I have
really.
no problem with giving many more details.
Really,
online.
And if I could just add one more thing to those details, if you could include what are the cost-saving initiatives that your directors are trying to implement? Because, again, I think this is a fine budget, but as someone who's going to pay that $96, I would just like to know, listen, you know, they did this, they're trying to cut this, and it doesn't have to always come from salaries. I think the employees work pretty hard, and they've all earned their positions. But as somebody who runs a business, I'm always looking at the bottom line. Like Lily said, to see, you know, Director A has implemented X, Y, Z in order to reduce costs is a little bit reassuring as a citizen. Just a suggestion.
Thank you.
Okay?
Any further questions? So I'm going to ask Councillor Erdely to present the adoption of the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Be it resolved that Côte Saint-Luc City Council hereby adopts the 2018 operating budget as follows. Total revenues, $70,542,130. Total expenses and appropriations, $70,542,130 for a surplus/deficit of 0. Hereby annexed to the minutes to form an integral part of said document entitled Annex 1.
Moved by Councillor Erdely, seconded by Councillor Burko. Any further discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried unanimously. And now I'd ask for an adjournment of this meeting.
So moved, Mr.
Moved by
Mayor.
Councillor Kovac, seconded by Councillor Benizri. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried unanimously.